The rotting boat she inherited was a joke to everyone in Astoria, rusted, splintered, and barely afloat in its lonely slip at the edge of the marina. But for Tessa Rowe, a quiet female mechanic with a past she rarely spoke of, that rotting boat was the final legacy of a grandfather she barely knew. Locals mocked her for even stepping aboard, whispering that a female mechanic had no business chasing ghosts. Yet beneath the rotting boat's decaying shell, Tessa uncovered something far more powerful than anyone imagined, a secret that would shake the world and redefine everything she thought she knew about family, history, and herself. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Tessa Rowe didn't look like someone you'd expect to crawl out from under a diesel engine with grease smudged across her cheek, but that's exactly who she was. At just 28, she had already lived a few lifetimes worth of war, loss, and survival. In the misty, rain-soaked town of Astoria, Oregon, nestled between the Columbia River and the churning waves of the Pacific, she ran a one-woman mechanic shop tucked into a weathered boathouse beneath the shadow of the old bridge. The place smelled of salt, iron, and stale coffee. Most folks in town called her Scrap Girl. Not kindly. But she never flinched at the name. She used to be a Navy engineer, but that was before everything went sideways. Now, she lived quietly, just her workbench, and the hum of machines that didn't ask questions. No family, no friends, just oil-stained solitude and the ache of old battles buried under her skin. So when the shop's landline rang one gray morning, she almost didn't answer. "Miss Tessa Rowe," a man asked on the other end. "This is Thomas Wexler from the law offices of Wexler, Crane and Doyle. I'm calling about the estate of your grandfather, Captain Everett Rowe." The wrench slipped from her hand. 16 years of silence broken in an instant. The fog outside the garage hung heavy as Tessa sat in stunned silence, the receiver still pressed to her ear. Captain Everett Rowe. A name she hadn't allowed herself to think about in over a decade. Not since he stood in the rain outside her mother's funeral. Said nothing. Then left without a word. "I know this may come as a surprise," the lawyer said gently. "Your grandfather passed away 3 weeks ago. His will is straightforward. He left everything he owned to you. That includes a small vessel currently moored in Astoria Marina." Tessa's stomach twisted. What kind of boat, she asked, though the answer was already clawing its way through memory. The Ophelia Blue, 42 feet, registered under his name until 2 years ago when it was marked derelict. It's still in your family's slip. Technically, it's yours now. Her laugh was bitter. "I haven't heard from him in 16 years. And now I get to inherit a floating corpse." There was a pause. Then the lawyer added, "You're not obligated to keep it, Miss Rowe, but the marina is charging mooring fees. If you'd like to sign it over for salvage or scrap, I can send the forms." She could already picture the thing, salt-bleached, half-sunk, rust eating through the hull like rot in old bones. She'd passed it countless times walking the docks at night, never realizing it was his. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll take a look." The walk to the marina felt longer than usual, not because of the distance, but because of the weight. Astoria had never been gentle. The sea was always just a little too loud. The wind always carried a little too much history. The docks groaned underfoot like they remembered everything you wanted to forget. And today, everything whispered his name. When she reached slip 22, her breath caught. There it was, the Ophelia Blue. Worse than she imagined? Its once deep navy hull had faded into a sad, peeling gray. Rust streaks ran like tears down the sides. One of the portholes was cracked. Moss and salt had claimed every corner like nature itself was trying to erase it. And yet, something about it stood still, stubborn, like him. The padlock on the cabin hatch was old, but it clicked open easily. Her boots creaked against the warped deck as she stepped aboard. The air inside was thick mildew, seawater, and something older, the scent of time. The cabin was small, 2 benches, a fold-out bunk, a tarnished brass lamp dangling on a rusted hook. Dust motes danced in the filtered light through the cracked window. "This is what you left behind," she whispered. This, after everything. A part of her wanted to walk out, slam the hatch shut, and never return. Let the boat rot like the memories. But then something caught her eye. A leather-bound notebook, tucked carefully beneath the helm, placed, not dropped. It looked too clean for its surroundings. She hesitated, then picked it up. The cover was soft with age, the corners worn smooth. She opened it to the first page. "For Tessa, in case I never get the chance to explain." Her breath stilled. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned to the next page. His handwriting, small, precise, just like she remembered from the notes he used to leave in the shed when she was a kid, back when he still taught her how to repair fishing reels, back before he stopped coming around. "I know you think I abandoned you. Maybe I did. Maybe I deserved your silence. But what I did to protect you." The words blurred as tears pricked her eyes. She swallowed hard and kept reading. "They're watching. They always have been. If you're reading this, it means they've either lost interest or I've lost the fight. Either way, you have to decide whether to keep going or walk away." She flipped the next few pages, scribbled maps, latitude and longitude, tidal patterns, notes in hurried scrawl. "There's something beneath these waters, Tessa. I've spent my life searching, and I think I was finally close." She slammed the book shut, heart pounding, close to what she whispered. The wind howled outside the cabin like an answer she wasn't ready to hear. She stood frozen for a moment. The weight of the boat, the memories, and that damned notebook pressing on her chest like an anchor. Then she exhaled, slowly, controlled. Just like in the Navy, when fear tried to take over, and all you could do was breathe and move forward. She tucked the notebook into her jacket, took one last look around the creaking cabin, and stepped back out into the cold Oregon air. The Ophelia Blue wasn't just a rotting boat, it was a door, and it had just creaked open. Tessa didn't sleep that night. The storm rolled in around 2 a.m., the kind that made Astoria feel like the last outpost on Earth. Rain lashed against her shop windows like it was trying to scrub the town off the map. She sat in the garage's tiny back office, hunched over the notebook by flickering light. Her fingers were stained with oil and now smudged with salt, too, though whether it came from the sea or her eyes. She wasn't sure. She had read the words again and again. I had to make it look like I went mad. No one would believe the truth anyway. But it's real. Tessa, it's there. You have to trust your instincts. If you're anything like me, the puzzle won't let you go. It felt like her grandfather was reaching through time, his scrawl shaking her shoulders from beyond the grave. She didn't want this. She didn't want any of it. But she also couldn't stop. By sunrise, the storm had passed, leaving the marina washed clean and eerily quiet. The Ophelia Blue sat still in its slip, water slapping softly against its hull, as if the boat had been waiting for her return. Tessa climbed aboard again, boots still damp from the walk. She didn't know what she was looking for, only that the journal had stirred something deep and ancient in her gut. The kind of feeling that had kept her alive through explosions, blackouts, and nights on a metal cot with a sidearm under her pillow. She stood in the center of the cabin, arms crossed, letting her gaze sweep slowly around. Something was off. The floorboards under the helm, too clean. The wood there wasn't splintered like the rest of the cabin. It was polished, worn by years of standing. Not decay. She knelt and ran her fingers along the edge. Nothing. Just wood. But her fingertips felt it ever so faint a seam, a tiny shift in grain. She retrieved a flathead screwdriver from her tool belt and wedged it gently into the crease. The wood gave a reluctant groan before something clicked. A panel lifted. Beneath it wasn't rot or mold like she expected. It was cloth, carefully wrapped in oilskin, neat, deliberate. Her breath caught. Inside, a thick leather folder filled with nautical charts, a sealed envelope with her name in black ink, a small black velvet pouch. Her hands shook as she picked up the envelope. The paper was soft, aged. She tore it open. If you've found this, you're in it now. There's no turning back. Inside the pouch is the key. Not metaphorical, literal. But don't use it yet. You need to understand what's at stake first. Go to the bow, the port side locker. Lift the false bottom. Tessa didn't even stop to process. She climbed onto the deck, walked to the bow, and knelt beside the rusted port side compartment. The latch screeched as she opened it. A smell hit her dust. Rope. Seaweed. She lifted the old raincoat, a bundle of chains. And then, her hand struck hollow wood. The bottom wasn't real. She braced herself, slid her fingers beneath the false floor, and pulled it free. Beneath was a metal lockbox. Dented, but intact. Ancient. She grabbed the velvet pouch, opened it, inside a tiny iron key, cool and sharp in her palm. The lock turned with a satisfying click. She opened it. Inside were photos. Dozens, black and white, yellowing at the edges, paintings, sculptures, stamped documents, some in German, others in French. One photograph made her gasp. It was of a child no more than 7 years old, standing in front of a grand painting of a sunlit vineyard. The child held a teddy bear. The painting behind him was signed Cézanne. On the back, in her grandfather's handwriting, Vienna, 1941. Taken, hidden, tracked. Another note, clipped to the inside of the lid. They never stopped hunting for it, neither did I. She sat back on her heels, heart pounding. This wasn't just a stash of war junk. This was documentation, proof, art stolen by the Nazis, tracked by an American fisherman obsessed with secrets. And now, her responsibility. Tessa's mind raced. Why would her grandfather hide this here? Why not turn it in? Unless someone was watching. Suddenly, a shadow moved outside the boat. She froze. A figure stood at the edge of the dock. A man. Well-dressed. Too well-dressed for this part of town. He wasn't from here. She could feel it, the kind of stillness that doesn't belong. The kind of presence that isn't curious. It's calculated. The man turned and walked away. Not a word, not a glance. Just a silent warning. She quickly locked the box again and shoved it beneath the locker. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the wind picked up. Whatever her grandfather had uncovered, someone still wanted it. And now they knew she had it. The lockbox hadn't left her sight. Back in her garage apartment. Tessa placed it on the workbench where she normally rebuilt alternators. The velvet pouch and key sat beside it like relics from another life. She pulled down the blackout shades, locked the door, and turned off the open sign. For the first time in years, she didn't care if she missed work. The photographs haunted her. That child in front of the painting, the handwriting on the back, the dates. Everything about it screamed impossible, yet it was real, tangible. And her grandfather, the same man who left a 7-year-old girl crying in the driveway when he drove away with a truck full of fishing gear and a heart full of secrets. Had he been protecting her? Or was that just another excuse? She needed answers. The leather folder, the charts. Tessa laid them out carefully. Some of them were layered with tracing paper, full of lines and circles marked in red pencil. Others had notes scribbled in shorthand, as if written in a rush. One chart had a series of coordinates annotated with arrows, and a phrase written in block letters. Not a wreck, a cache, moved 1953, confirmed. Then there was a journal entry. She almost missed it. It had been folded and tucked behind one of the maps. The date, June 12, 2004. They followed me again today. Silver sedan, parked near the cannery, same as last week. I saw them talk to the harbor master. Pretended not to notice. If they get to the Ophelia, it's over. I've taken steps, left the key where only she would think to look. If she's anything like me, she won't stop once she finds the first piece. She read the last line again. If she's anything like me. She wanted to cry, but she didn't know why. She wanted to scream, but it would have just echoed off the walls. Instead, she whispered to no one. You thought I wouldn't come looking, didn't you? But she had. And now, it was too late to pretend otherwise. By late afternoon, the clouds had broken and sunlight streamed through her grimy workshop windows. Dust floated in the golden beams like ashes suspended in time. That's when she decided to call the number. It had been written in the back of the notebook, a name, barely legible. Dr. Anya Sharma, maritime historian. She hesitated for a full minute, phone in hand, thumb hovering. Then she hit call. The line rang once, twice. Then a woman answered, calm. British accent, clipped and direct. Dr. Sharma. Hi, Tessa said, suddenly feeling stupid. My name is Tessa Rowe. My grandfather was Everett Rowe. He mentioned you in his notes. Silence. Then, the tone shifted entirely. Tessa, where are you right now? Astoria? Oregon? Listen to me carefully. Dr. Sharma said, her voice suddenly sharp. Do not return to the boat alone, and do not speak to anyone else about what you found. You may already be compromised. Tessa's spine straightened. Why, what the hell is going on? I'll explain everything when I get there. I can be in Astoria by noon tomorrow. Can you meet me somewhere public, somewhere neutral? Tessa nodded reflexively. Yeah. The Riverbend Cafe? Downtown? Good. Come alone? And bring the documents? Click. The line went dead. That night, sleep didn't come. She sat up in bed. The journal clutched to her chest like it could guard her from everything chasing her. Now memories. Shadows. Men in silent suits who didn't belong on docks. She thought of her grandfather. The way he used to carry her on his shoulders. The way he stopped showing up. The silence. The hurt. And now this. Charts. Coordinates. Stolen art. Surveillance. A locked box full of secrets that governments had buried. He hadn't left her because he didn't care. He left because he did. The truth reshaped the contours of her memory like wind smoothing a jagged cliff. What once looked like neglect now looked like sacrifice. Every absence, every unanswered letter, every missed birthday, it was all part of something bigger. And he'd trusted her to finish what he started. That realization hit like a freight train. She wasn't just his granddaughter, she was the last torchbearer of his mission. And now, she wasn't just fixing broken engines anymore. She was unearthing a history some people had spent decades trying to erase. The Riverbend Cafe smelled like overbrewed coffee and fried eggs, a comfort, if not exactly a luxury. Tessa had chosen the back corner booth, facing the door, instinctively putting her back against the wall. It was just after noon, and the lunch crowd had thinned. A bell jingled. She knew it was her before the door fully swung open. The woman was in her early 40s, dark hair tied back in a tight ponytail, wearing canvas cargo pants and a waterproof jacket that looked like it had seen more ship decks than sidewalks. She moved like someone used to open water, measured, balanced, unafraid of unpredictability. She scanned the cafe once, then made her way toward Tessa. "Ms. Rowe, Tessa," she said, standing. "You must be Dr. Sharma." They shook hands. Tessa noticed the faint calluses on her fingers, not a soft academic, someone who worked. "I ordered coffee," Tessa said. "But it's terrible. Perfect," Sharma replied with a tired smile. "Terrible coffee is always honest." Once seated, the small talk vanished. Tessa slid the leather folder across the table. Sharma opened it slowly, reverently, as if she were handling a sacred text. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning charts, annotations, tide marks, coded notes. Her expression hardened. "I knew he was onto something," she murmured, "but I had no idea how close he got." She flipped to the photograph of the child standing in front of the Cézanne. Her fingertips hovered above it. "I've seen this painting in stolen art archives," she whispered. "It disappeared in 1941, belonged to the Lehmann family. They were forced out of Vienna. The father was a lawyer. The child in this picture, he'd be in his 80s now, if he's alive." She paused. "This isn't just art. This is evidence. Documentation of theft on a massive scale. Your grandfather was cataloging every piece he believed survived the war. He wasn't treasure hunting. He was building a case for repatriation." Tessa blinked. Why would he do all that alone?" Sharma leaned back, her fingers still gently resting on the edge of the folder. Because no one believed him, and because the people who did believe him wanted him silenced. Tessa exhaled slowly. The pieces were locking together like the gears of an engine finally snapping into place. He wrote that someone was following him. Tessa said, "Silver sedan, harbor master, watching the boat." He knew they were closing in. Sharma nodded. He was right. Meridian Recovery isn't a salvage company. It's a shell used by private collectors and corrupt institutions to track down stolen artifacts and bury them. Sometimes permanently. Your grandfather was a threat to their entire operation. A beat passed. "And now I am too," Tessa said. Sharma looked at her. Really looked at her. "You don't have to do this. You've already done more than most people ever would. You can walk away. I won't judge you." Tessa laughed under her breath. "It wasn't cruel. It was tired. If I was going to walk away, I would have signed the salvage papers and let the Ophelia Blue rot." She met Sharma's eyes. "I'm not leaving this half-finished. Not if I can help finish it." A slow, proud smile tugged at the corners of the historian's mouth. "In that case, you need to see the rest of what he left behind." They returned to the Ophelia Blue later that evening, long after the marina had emptied. Tessa unlocked the cabin and led Sharma inside. The boat groaned with memory. Together, they searched carefully this time. Sharma moved with practiced precision, tapping the wooden walls, checking for hollows. Her hand slid across a bookshelf that Tessa had barely noticed before. "He always said the best hiding place is the one that doesn't look like one," she murmured. Then she stopped, pressed her palm flat against the wall behind the helm. Her eyes narrowed. "Here." Tessa joined her. There was nothing visible, no latch, no seam, but something felt warmer, polished, worn. She pressed harder. Click. A sliver of the panel popped open like a secret breathing its first breath in years. Inside was no paper map, no ink. Instead, the oak paneling had been carved with painstaking precision. A compass rose, a line of etched numbers, coordinates. "Is this it?" Tessa asked, voice low. Sharma's voice was almost reverent. "It's not where the art was stolen. It's where it was hidden." Tessa stepped back. The wood gleamed faintly in the dim light, each number like a whisper from the dead. Her grandfather's final secret. Not a journal, not a folder, not a speech. A map carved into the ribs of his ship, something no thief could steal or burn. Something meant to be found, by her. The next morning, fog blanketed Astoria like a warning. The streets were quiet, fishermen long gone before sunrise. But the Ophelia Blue for the first time in years felt awake. Tessa stood at the helm, gloves on, hair tied back, staring down at the carved coordinates in the wood like they were sacred scripture. Her hands, the same ones that once rebuilt carburetors and hydraulic pumps, were now tasked with something far heavier, guarding a truth that could shake powerful people and rewrite forgotten history. The FBI had arrived just after dawn. Quiet. Unmarked cars, no sirens, no spectacle, just firm handshakes and eyes that had seen too much. Agent Marshall, mid-40s, square jaw, tired eyes, briefed them quickly on the dock. "We've had Meridian on our radar for years," he said, flipping through a black folder thick with sealed photos. "But your grandfather got further than we ever did. We didn't know about the coordinates. That changes everything." He looked at Tessa. "You realize this makes you a target?" She nodded. "I already am." The plan moved quickly. FBI divers, a Coast Guard perimeter. Tessa insisted on going down herself, despite the warnings. "You're not trained for underwater recovery," Marshall had said. "I was Navy," she replied. "I know how to follow a depth gauge and breathe through fear." Dr. Sharma backed her. She knows the boat. She understands what her grandfather would have done. She has to go. By midday, they were 5 miles offshore. The Ophelia Blue led the convoy a ghost ship turned flagship. Tessa stood on deck in a black wetsuit, her heart pounding beneath neoprene. The weight belt felt lighter than her thoughts. The moment before descent. Dr. Sharma handed her a small, waterproof case. Find what he protected. Not for money, not for fame, but because some stories are too important to stay buried. Tessa nodded, then fell backward into the ocean. The water swallowed her in silence. Green-blue vastness, bubbles rising like lost time. She followed the guide rope down 30 feet, 50, 70. The light faded. And then she saw it. Tucked beneath an outcrop of volcanic rock, shielded by natural stone, was a structure impossibly old, unnaturally clean. It wasn't a shipwreck. It was a vault. Inside waterproof crates strapped down with marine cable, heavy-duty, custom-made. Tessa's gloved fingers brushed one. The label was faded, but legible. Inventory A, August 1944, verified by H. Dearman. She opened the first crate. Inside paintings, dozens, all sealed in airtight, pressure-resistant frames. Gold leaf still intact, brush strokes still alive. She swam to the next crate, sculptures, a bronze bust of a woman with a laurel wreath, her expression so human it hurt. This was no hoard. This was a collection. Curated, catalogued, hidden. And her grandfather had found it. Then, movement. A diver. Not one of theirs, the glint of a spear gun. Tessa's blood ran cold. She backed against the vault wall, barely breathing. But before the figure could raise the weapon, two dark shapes streaked in, FBI divers. A silent clash of bodies, fins, bubbles, fists. No shouting, just war beneath water. It ended fast. The intruder was disarmed and dragged upward. Tessa's heart hammered. She looked down at the crates again, at the treasure of lost worlds. Her lungs burned not from the air, but from the sheer weight of it all. They were trying to steal this, to erase it, but now they couldn't, because she wouldn't let them. Back on the deck, soaked and shaking, she stared out at the gray horizon. "Doctor," Sharma wrapped a towel around her shoulders. "You did it." "No," Tessa said quietly, staring down at her hands. "We did it. He did it. I just listened." She looked at her reflection in the water hair plastered to her face, lips cracked with salt. But her eyes, clear, alive, focused. She wasn't the same girl who'd answered the phone in her garage 4 days ago. That girl was broken, angry, tired. This woman. She was a steward of memory, a soldier for truth. That night, back on dry land, the FBI secured the crates. News hadn't broken yet, but it would. Headlines were inevitable. Still, Tessa didn't want the world's attention. She just wanted to make sure that what had been stolen, time, art, history, dignity, was finally returned. And that her grandfather's name, long whispered with bitterness, would now be spoken with honor. She had spent years fixing broken engines. Now, she was fixing a broken legacy. The first news report broke at 6:03 a.m. Historic Nazi-looted art cache recovered off Oregon coast. By noon, it was everywhere. Major networks, global headlines, historians arguing on live TV, art museums scrambling to verify inventories, international law experts debating who owned what. But back in Astoria, it was quiet. Tessa stood on the dock beside the Ophelia Blue, coffee in hand, watching fog roll across the Columbia River like it had done every morning of her life. But something was different now. The silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. The boat had been cordoned off by the FBI, now officially declared a federal crime scene and cultural recovery zone. They'd offered to move it, to tow it to a secure port. Tessa said no. "This is where he found it," she told them. "This is where it stays for now." She had become its guardian, and she wasn't done yet. 2 weeks later, she stood in front of a room full of strangers' reporters, agents, museum officials. Cameras clicked, lights glared, her palms were sweating. But she didn't flinch. Behind her hung a single painting, a girl in a field of sunflowers, eyes full of wonder, brushstrokes as vibrant as the life that had been stolen when it was taken from a family in Prague in 1942. Tessa stepped up to the podium. "My grandfather wasn't a hero in the way we usually define heroes," she said. "He didn't wear medals. He didn't give speeches. He didn't even say goodbye." A pause. But he spent his life quietly chasing justice for people he never met. He cataloged pain, preserved memory, and risked everything to protect the truth. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. "I used to think he left because he didn't care. Now I know he left because he did, because he had to keep me safe, and because he believed someone someday would finish what he started." She glanced at the painting, and somehow, that someone turned out to be me. When the applause faded and the press dispersed, a woman approached her. Elderly, elegant, her hands trembling as they clutched a faded envelope. She held up the photo. The girl in the sunflower field. "That was my sister." She whispered in thickly accented English. "Our family fled before they came. My parents, they didn't make it. But this painting, it was in our living room. It was the last thing I remember before we left Prague. She looked at Tessa with tearful gratitude. I thought it was gone forever. Tessa didn't have words. She simply nodded, tears burning in her own eyes. And just like that, the mission became more than her grandfather's story. It became theirs. The Ophelia Blue never went back to being a ghost ship. With funds from international grants and anonymous donors, it was restored carefully. No glitz, no glamour, just wood polished back to dignity. Brass rails shining again under Astoria's soft sunlight. The carved coordinates preserved under glass, still etched into the helm, like a scar that had become a badge of honor. It was moored permanently at the newly renamed Everett Row Cultural Harbor. And every summer, Tessa opened the deck to school groups, veterans, and survivors' families. She never charged a cent. One morning, while repainting the handrails, a teenage girl asked her, "Were you always brave like this?" Tessa smiled. "No. I was angry and scared. But sometimes, that's where bravery starts." 6 months later, Tessa established the Rowe Foundation for Silent Guardians. Its mission fund independent researchers, whistleblowers, and survivors preserving stories that powerful people want buried. Not a museum, a movement. Because she'd learned something in the months since everything changed. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens and spotlights. Sometimes it walks in on tired feet, carrying a leather notebook, and leaves behind a key. And sometimes it's a mechanic in Oregon who opens the door. She still worked on engines, still took late-night walks along the marina, still kept the same rusted coffee thermos on her workbench. But something in her had shifted. Not broken, rebuilt, stronger, purposeful, connected to something far greater than herself. And every time she looked at the Ophelia Blue, she didn't see a boat anymore. She saw a promise. Kept. Tessa Rowe thought she had inherited a burden, a broken boat, a broken family, a broken past. But what she really inherited was a purpose. The Ophelia Blue wasn't just a vessel, it was a compass. Not one that pointed north, but one that pointed inward toward courage, conviction, and a truth too long buried beneath silence and shame. The lesson is simple, yet powerful sometimes. The legacy we receive isn't gold or comfort, it's unfinished justice, and it becomes our duty to carry it forward. The mechanic girl mocked for inheriting a rotting boat had become the woman who helped history breathe again. Because for Tessa and for those who will follow her compass, legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we protect. The end. Up next, 2 more stories waiting to change the way you see the world. Click to keep walking with us. And if you believe some truths are worth digging for, don't forget to hit subscribe.